Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and today I am back with day number 9 of 30 Days of Sketches with Chrissy's Beautiful Life. Today's sketch comes from Claudia Henderson, and I will link her social media below. I pulled out my Doodlebug pumpkin spice collection to document some photos of Eli at the pumpkin patch. This sketch basically calls for strips of paper on either side of the layout. I first started looking through the border strips and was trying to find something that would work there. I only ended up finding one border strip that would work, and it says, "So thankful for you," and it's repeated multiple times. I did cut out both of the border strips, but I actually only end up using one of them. One of the photos has Eli sitting right next to a scarecrow, and there was a scarecrow image in the ephemera pieces. And I thought it would be really cool if I had these strips of paper mimic the colors on the scarecrow. So I have the scarecrow on my stamping block over to the right, and I am really going through all of the Doodlebug petite prints that match those colors. And that's one of the things that I love so much about Doodlebug is that all of their collections are included in one of the 24 colors that they have. They mix and match the colors, but if you have a bunch of their petite prints, you can really showcase an entire layout and just purchase the ephemera pieces and work with the petite prints because there are so many options. So I looked through my Doodlebug petite prints and I pulled out the orange, green, yellow, a couple of shades of brown, and blue. And as you can see, I am making sure that I matched up those colors pretty well to the scarecrow. And I love the way that this comes out. I feel like I'm probably the only person that's going to notice that. I enjoy it and I think that it looks really cool. I did decide to pull out my distress inks in colors that would match the Doodlebug petite prints and ink up all of the edges in those colors. I feel like the inking really helped set off the petite prints, especially when there were similar colors close together. Now, even though I had similar colors close together, I still decided to use a different print, so it does look different. I really only needed a 12-inch sheet of paper, so I only cut out one strip. These strips are 1 inch wide and then 12 inches long, and I'm basically just cutting them in half into different sizes. On some of them, they are longer on the left, and then on others, they're longer on the right. And I love that staggered look. I did decide to cut that "so thankful" in between the words, so it made sure that it didn't cut off the phrase. Once I got them all laid down, I did move the layout so that the strips are lined up. And I did this so that it would make sure that the strips were equal on both sides. Spoiler alert, it didn't work out very well. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but these papers do not line up. And I cut them from the same sheet of paper, so I'm not sure how that happened. As I'm getting these strips down, I do want to encourage you to check out everyone else who is playing along with 30 Days of Sketches. There's so many people that are playing along, not only people who have created the sketches, but also other people who are playing along. There is a playlist listed below, and you can click on it for all of the inspiration for today's sketch. So this is where it starts to get strange. It doesn't line up. And what happened was I had one piece of paper, which is this craft brown paper, and I used scraps for that. So that is the only piece that wasn't a true 12 by 12. And so as you can see, as I put one on top of the other, it is off just by a small amount. I would say less than 1/8 of an inch. It's such a tiny amount. But once I get it cut to the same size, then I can lay my strips back down and everything lines up. Or so I thought, because as you can see, I still have gaps in between some of the papers. So what I decided to do was pull out the border strips that are on the sticker sheet. I found this yellow wave pattern and I put that on the yellow paper. And then I also found on the border strip paper a really small, thin line that was left over from another piece that I miscut by mistake. But it was just big enough piece of brown that worked perfectly to cover up that gap on the brown paper. So I did ink up that edges, even though it's super small, and then used my scrapbook.com adhesive to adhere to the back of it, and then laid it down on top of that craft brown paper. I also had to pick up that So Thankful paper because it was not down straight. Then using my X-Acto knife on the back of it to cut these strips apart. And I will tell you that this was definitely a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Because now, as you can see, I also have a gap in that green paper. So I cut another really tiny piece from the green paper and I used the back of it, which is the linen. The linen is on the very bottom, and so I felt like there was that contrast of the Swiss dots as well as the gingham paper, and then I have a really tiny, like smaller than 1/8 of an inch piece of the linen paper, just enough to cover up that gap. And then again, using my X-Acto knife to trim them apart. And now I'm going to lay out these photos. These photos are another set of just random photos of Eli at the pumpkin patch. These photos actually all have him in the pumpkin patch or close to the pumpkin patch. I have this one photo that's on the bottom right where there's stacks of pumpkins, and then next to it is a chart, like a growth chart. And so standing next to it, you can kind of see his height. It's not really exact. And then there's also this just random photo of Eli holding an egg, and then that photo of him on the far right next to that scarecrow, and I put the scarecrow ephemera piece next to it as well. As I started to adhere the photos down, I realized that the strips were going out a little farther than I wanted, especially for the 6x4 photos. I wasn't too concerned about the 3x4 photos at the very bottom because I knew I had that one photo that was overlapping. But I really wanted the strips of paper to stop before the 6x4 photo. So I just pulled out my T-square ruler and X-Acto knife and started trimming down the pieces. I really used the photo as a guide in regards to how much of the paper I needed to cut off. Some of the pieces were really small, like 1/4 of an inch, and some of them were much larger, almost a full inch of paper. But I think having that trimmed off really does help showcase that they are strips of paper that don't go all the way across the layout. And that was really what the sketch called for. So once I got all of the papers trimmed up, then I went and adhered my 6x4 photo down using my T-square ruler. And then I did the exact same thing on the left-hand side. These photos were taken at Corn Fusion, which is not our normal pumpkin patch that we go to. We were trying out a different place this year because they had recently opened up. And we had a lot of fun, but we definitely enjoyed our other normal pumpkin patch place a lot better. Because I only had 2 photos on the left-hand side and I did not have a photo that was overlapping the strips on the left-hand side, I also decided to trim down the paper from the bottom where the 3x4 photos were, as well as the top where the 6x4 photo was. I also end up using these tiny scraps to make my tiny hearts for this layout. I love using those little tiny pieces to make the tiny hearts. They make so much of an impact being so small, but also matching the paper exactly, especially when I'm using the linen paper, because I feel like the linen paper is such a small print that it looks really nice in that small heart or star shape. I did put the scarecrow up on fun foam and added him down with some liquid adhesive. Over on the left-hand side, to balance out the layout, I did add this square that has an owl on it and it says, "I'll always love you." I also decided to add that up on fun foam so that it matched the scarecrow on the right-hand side of the layout. Then looking through the ephemera pieces, I felt like the scarecrow needed to say something since the owl was kind of saying something. So I added a little tag that says, "You're sweet." And then I also found an owl ephemera piece and decided to add that to the upper right-hand side of the layout so I could have my visual triangle. I also added a little tag at the bottom that says, "You've grown." And I thought that that was a perfect little tag to add to the bottom right next to that photo of him with the growth chart. My title is going to be "My Little Pumpkin, I Love You." This collection has a lot of speech bubbles, and even though I end up tucking this piece in and I probably didn't have to cut it off, I could have avoided that. I did go ahead and cut off the speech bubble part of it so it just looks more like an oval. I did also use my distress ink to ink the edges. So I tucked in that little tag that says "I love you," and then I used some fun foam on this larger piece of My Little Pumpkin. Once I get the fun foam down, I do use some liquid adhesive to adhere the title to the layout. And then I pulled out my tiny heart die. I will link this die below. I picked it up at scrapbook.com. It comes in a pack where there are 3 sizes of hearts as well as 3 sizes of stars. It does sell out quite frequently, but if you hit that notify button, scrapbook.com will let you know when it is available. The link that I do have posted below is an affiliate link, so please know that any purchases that you make, I do get a small commission at no additional charges to you. But I love this die. I create this stacked look by adding 2 pieces of white cardstock and then taking the Doodlebug Petite prints, especially those scraps that I cut out, and using those to put on top of the white so that it gives it a pattern. I like cutting out all 3 sizes and adding them to my embellishment clusters. So over on the far right, next to that owl, I added a green, brown, and blue one. Next to my title, I also added a blue, brown, and green one. And then down by the owl, I added a set as well as over by the scarecrow, and then also where it says "You've grown." I then pulled out my stitching mat and my stitching tools. I do have these linked below. You can pick them up on Amazon. I have the poker tool as well as my ruler, and then my thread, my needles, all of the stitching items are linked below. I put a straight stitch on almost all of the strips of paper, and then off camera I did stitch on my layout. I slowed it down here so that you could see the strips. I did a tone on tone with the same color thread as the pattern paper. And I feel like the thread just elevates those strips of paper just enough to make it perfect layout. I then pulled out these enamel shapes that I have from Doodlebug and added a couple around the layout in just random places to add just a little extra to the layout. And then that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I did my journaling off camera, and my journaling is on the left-hand side of the layout, and it says "Pumpkin Kisses and Harvest Wishes. My wish for you: find someone that makes you truly happy, be successful in whatever you choose to do in life, continue to strive to be a better person every day, that you know how much I love you." If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.